why shouldn't Pluto be considered a planet? And I think I have a really great reason that no matter what you know about science or planets or anything, it's very convincing. He's a dog. And we should consider dogs planets, I think. No, but in seriousness, what is a planet? This is the IAU's definition of a planet. It's the International Astronomical Union. And I got this from their official website. But this is their official definition of a planet. The first point, pretty easy, it goes around the sun. So that's definitely true of pretty much everything in the solar system. The next one is a little more complicated. And all it is saying is that basically the thing is big enough and has enough mass and gravity to squeeze it into a sphere, which is pretty much the most stable thing for an object to be once it gets kind of stable out. And interestingly enough, an object doesn't have to be spherical perfectly. Our Earth isn't even. Just close enough or has the potential to in the future because it has enough gravity now. And the last point means that the lane in which it orbits around the sun doesn't have any other objects in it. But Majita Cook of, I forget which university, but he's a PhD from Cornell, and on the website Curious About Astronomy, he pointed out that the lane doesn't have to be completely clear of other objects. Jupiter, for instance, has asteroids that orbit around, or not orbited, but are in the same lane, but their combined mass is so much smaller than Jupiter that it's considered clear. So as long as every other object added up isn't bigger than the planet, then that's considered clear, and it can be considered a planet. This is our Earth, and obviously, for most of the reasons I just pointed out, it's why it's considered a planet. Because it's cleared the lane, it's pretty spherical and pretty, and it's more massive than anything else that would be in its orbit, including our moon. And there's Pluto. Now, this is actual true color. I doubt Pluto really looks like a burnt tennis ball in real life, but since it's so far away, we can't actually tell exactly what it is, the color. So we're sending a probe out there now. Hopefully we'll get a sense of pretty picture of that. But for now, that's roughly the color as far as we can resolve it. And here I have a website, since that's not to scale, just to compare the Earth to it. That's about how big Pluto is compared to the Earth. A little tiny dot right there. And there's the size of it down there and everything. So what is Pluto? Pluto would be what's considered now a dwarf planet. This is how it is, and this is how I think it should stay. But the first one's the same, the second one's the same, and it only gets changed at point C down here, where it hasn't cleared it. And this is because a belt of asteroid and comet-like objects that not as common as the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, called the Kuiper belt, is where Pluto lives. It's very similar to a lot of its neighbors. We just don't talk about them very often because they're farther out and harder to discover. And since it's so much like them, to call Pluto a planet would mean that we'd have to call hundreds or even thousands of other objects planets. So instead of having like a 9-letter or 8-letter little thing to memorize all of the order of the planets, you'd have to come up with like a 1,000-word sentence, possibly remember them all. And I don't think kids want to do that. So that's why it's not considered a planet, because this is their official definition for what a dwarf planet is, and that's what it's considered. Now, it's also not a satellite. Now, Pluto technically has a satellite called Charon, but that's up for debate because it's about the same size. It's a little smaller, and its point of orbit isn't actually inside Pluto. Like our moon orbits around Earth, pretty much. Its point of orbit's almost inside the center of the Earth. But for Pluto, it's almost like they're almost spinning around this common point because their gravity's so similar. So it's more of like a couple than a planet and a moon, which is yet another reason why it's not, exactly a planet status. Here's a collection of some of the other dwarf planets that, if Pluto was considered a planet, would probably have to be considered a planet. There's Mars and Earth and the Moon for comparison. But that's Eris. That was the one. That's what brought about the whole debate. It was discovered right beyond Pluto's orbit, and it's roughly the same size. So when this came up, it was discovered by Mike Brown, and he's the guy known as the Pluto killer that gets hate mail from little kids, including some physicist elders. But that was discovered. After that, there came up this debate. Well, what do we call a planet if we're going to keep discovering things like this? And that Ceres is in between the asteroid belt and Jupiter. And it's not quite as big, but it would also have to be considered a planet if it was Pluto would be considered a planet. There's the map of the solar system, also from the International Astronomical Union. And this is the scale, and that's roughly the size of like all those dwarf planets compared to the regular planets in the solar system. So, compared to Jupiter, which takes up several hundreds of pixels, each one of those is about a pixel, and there are thousands of other objects just like that, and it's all just going to be on Pluto's orbit. And this brings up a good point. You know, I've been talking about this planet identity. If Pluto's a planet, being a planet doesn't really mean anything. So we could say we're on the planet Earth, but all that would mean is we're on some rock orbiting a sun, which there's trillions of other objects in our galaxy alone that do that. So, you know, planets need to know who they are. This is a quote from Mike Brown about the hate mail he receives from 13-year-olds who have now grown up and started drinking and now send him obscene messages over his phone at 3 in the morning, which he finds fun amusing. So it's kind of a trivial thing, you know, naming. People don't really think it's a big deal, but it's a big thing in science because, you know, people like to name things. It helps us talk about and classify stuff. And science can be, you know, obtuse and hard for people to get into. So if we have clear definitions of things, it makes it a lot easier for people to actually talk about it. And also, even though kids have been sending him hate mail and stuff, it does get them interested in astronomy. You know, they might not like it, but at least they're now kind of interested in learning about it. I think anytime you can get kids to learn about science, that's always a great thing. So with that being said, I hope you also agree that Pluto should remain a dwarf planet, and thanks for listening.